It is 4 o'clock on the East Coast, 1 o'clock on the West Coast, so we're going to do our best to get started on time here. I'm going to be putting everybody on mute to eliminate some background noise. But real quickly, just wanted to welcome everybody. Again, like I said, it's 4 o'clock p.m. here on the East Coast. Everyone's now on mute, but when the time comes for question or comments, I'm going to tell you how to request unmuting so we can go ahead and unmute you. My name is Ben Gubitz, Associate Director here at American Promise, and welcome to the Constitution Day webinar hosted by American Promise. Big thanks to all of you who have taken time out of your busy weekend to join us on this historic 230th anniversary of the signing of our Constitution. As many folks know, we have the oldest written Constitution still in force in the world, and it starts with 3 words: we the people. And that's really what this call is all about. That's what this fight for the 28th Amendment is all about. It's about us citizens banding together to fight for political equality and to ensure that we, the people, govern these United States, not big money and not corporations. So I'm going to pass it over to the call over to Jeff Clements, President of American Promise, here in just a moment. But before I do, I'd like to share this brief quote from Elizabeth Cady Stanton, who is a tireless force for women's suffrage and the 19th Amendment. Elizabeth Cady Stanton said, "The history of the past is but one long struggle upward toward equality." Again, I'm going to say that one more time. The history of the past is but one long struggle upward toward equality. Again, that's what we're here to talk about today, and that's what the 28th Amendment is all about. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it on over to Jeff Clements, founder and president of American Promise. Hey, Jeff, how you doing?
I'm well, Ben. Thanks. How are you doing?
Wonderful, thanks.
Okay, and here we'll go. So hello, everybody, and thank you for being here with us on this Constitution Day. Happy Constitution Day. I want to talk today with you all about our struggle, our fight, our win, and our winning plan for the 28th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution so that people govern, not money. I'll share some thoughts on our strategy and where we go from here and how all of us can help win this. But before I do, I wanted to just say a few words about Constitution Day. It's marks, of course, September 17th, 1787, when the convention in Philadelphia was completed. The founders, as we call them now, came out of the convention with a constitution for the United States of America. And famously, Ben Franklin was asked by a citizen, "What kind of government have you created?" and said in reply, "A republic if you can keep it." And that's the key. That's the key to the country. It's the key to our work today. It's a republic if we can keep it. It wasn't finished in 1787. In fact, it was just beginning. And the kind of work that we're doing with this 28th Amendment is the story of America. Some of you may have, as I do, the American Promise Pocket Constitution. You can get it online at americanpromise.net, but you'll see if you count the pages, there's about 34 pages in the Constitution there, and almost half of it, literally 16 pages, half of it was not there in 1787. It's amendments that the people adopted. And if we look at what those amendments are, it really is the story of America. Everything that is about our aspirations, our struggle to fulfill the American promise, from ending slavery, the Bill of Rights, equal protection and equal right to vote, women voting, election of senators, poll tax ended in civil rights, checks against corruption, concentrated power, you name it. Our 27 amendments ratified by 38 states, pushed through Congress, 2/3 of Congress by the people, are what made not only the Constitution but our country as we know it today. And so that's why we are confident that our responsibility to win this 28th Amendment is something we will fulfill, just like every other generation. So let me move through, and I think to finish on Constitution Day, the point is, we call the founders, as they rightly were and should be celebrated, but all of us are founders. All of the Americans who pushed for amendments and won them were founders. The unknown, the forgotten, the nameless now, Those are the Americans who have built the Constitution as we know it in our country, and our founders too. So that's what we celebrate on Constitution Day. And let's turn to why we need the 28th Amendment. This is what we'll run through real quick, and then we'll open up the phone lines and bring you into the conversation. But I want to run through why we need the 28th Amendment. Many of you know this. Many of you have been working with us in this fight for some time. Others are brand new to it, drawn to our cross-partisan call to get big money out of politics and get people back in. So I think it's always good to kind of check back in on the 28th Amendment, need for it, and our strategy to win it. So let's do that. This is Doris Kearns Goodwin I'm moving to now. As you know, I think many of you, she's on our advisory council and has just been a terrific champion of this. And I start with her because it's important to bear in mind she had specialized in amendment periods in our history. If you think of her work, the famous presidential historian from Lincoln to Roosevelt, it's LBJ. It's periods of time much like our own, tumultuous, volatile, when the American people reset our constitutional foundation and our republic by winning constitutional amendments. And she rightly says it's time for us to do it again. Now her colleague on our advisory council comes from the other side of the aisle, Jim Leach. Jim Leach, a Republican from Iowa, lays the stakes out pretty clearly. When the Supreme Court struck down our campaign finance laws, said corporations have the same rights as people to spend unlimited money in our elections, what Representative Leach says is that genetically altered our democratic DNA, pushing us into corporatism and oligarchy. That's the stakes. That's why we need an amendment. It's the same old struggle in American life, the biggest struggle we have of oligarchy or democracy, concentrated power like the robber barons and the corporations that ran the Senate before the 17th Amendment, or the slaveholder oligarchy that had to be overturned not only by civil war but with the 13th Amendment. That's the fork in the road we face now. And that sounds dire and stark, and it is. If you look at the numbers, since that Citizens United decision in 2010, $40 billion has poured into our elections. And here's the key. Most of that money comes from just a fraction of the people. Less than 1% accounts for almost all the money. That's why this gentleman on the slide is silenced. It's not free speech for him or for most Americans. And again, this isn't about class warfare or resentment, as that woman says on the slide. I don't mind you being rich. I mind you buying my government. So the money is pouring in. It's often through front groups. Sometimes people will say, oh, well, I don't see corporations actually making political contributions very much. And that's a little bit of a misinformation. If you look at how the corporations and some big unions push money into our elections, you usually don't see the source. This is sometimes called dark money. And this is just 3 examples in recent years, adding up to $700 million, just 3 sort of front groups or super PACs or organizations that bring the money into our elections from corporate and union sources. And I just picked these because you can see it's a Republican Governors Association, Democratic Governors Association. It goes on both sides, and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. And it's some of the biggest corporations in the world. That's how we get control of a corporate elite over our election system. It's how we, the people, lose our power and have our representatives not be accountable to us. It's why we need the 28th Amendment. It's not just legal theory. It's not just campaign finance. It's literally everything. Everything we live by, whether it's in our communities, our environment, our livelihoods and the economy, our kids, depend on us having a voice, depend on us not all agreeing, but on being equal citizens in a republic, able to govern together. And the way we do that in America is having our politicians be elected by us and answerable to us. And the money that is poured into our system, the corporate power that has aggregated and concentrated in recent years, is making that impossible. So we have to get the amendment. There's lots of other good reforms, lots of things we have to do. But without an amendment, we can't do any of them. If we have a constitutional foundation that says we're not equal citizens, that says if you have more money, you have a right to have more say. You have a right to have more power. You have a right to govern other people if you have more money. That's not the American way, but if we don't get the amendment, we can't get these other reforms. I think of it often as a foundation to a house. You can see this house, I hope you can see it, is sort of teetering. It's collapsing around itself. Abraham Lincoln famously said, "A house divided against itself cannot stand," in reference to our republic. I think the house metaphor still works well, and our house is crumbling. And the reason is we have a constitutional foundation that is at odds with the American promise of human liberty and equal citizenship. And so nothing else is able to stand on the foundation because it's broken. So we fix the foundation with the 28th Amendment. It doesn't do everything. It gets us a foundation. Then we can start building the house and having a republic that is strong and reflects our values as Americans. So that's the way the 28th Amendment, that's why it's needed. That's what it does. It is the most important thing we can do in our lifetimes, I believe. Other than the 18th Amendment and Prohibition, amendments are forever. They're how we move forward as a country. They're how we deliver the republic to the next generation. It's how we'll do it with the 28th Amendment. So let me turn to strategy. How do we win it? What do we need to do? What are we doing now? What can we do better? Well, we need three things. Amendments are won by three things. All amendments have always had to have three things come together to win, because they're hard. You need 2/3 of Congress, ratification 3/4 of the states. It doesn't happen easily, but it happens when necessary, and it's necessary now. The three things are national consensus. You need most Americans to essentially understand and agree this has to happen. You need to turn that consensus into political power. It's not enough for 85% of the people to think something has to happen if they're powerless to make it happen. We have to be powerful. We have to make our voices count. And we have to be everywhere. It's not top down. It's not going to be done by other people. It's not going to be done from Washington. It's going to be done by us on this call and all over the country, Americans in our hometowns, in our communities. We have to be decentralized. We have to be everywhere, and we have to speak up and act and take action. So those three things are those are the pillars, the fundamentals of the American Promise strategy. So let's just walk through them. National consensus, the hardest part. We already have that. Most Americans want this. Most Americans are rooting for us, whether it's Democrats, Independents, Republicans. Year after year, the polls show Americans agree on this. They want money out of politics. They want the special interests out of politics. They want to get a republic of equal people, equal citizens, not equal in outcomes or material goods, but equal citizens, equal responsibility, so that we can govern ourselves. And so those are some polls, but polls aren't enough. We know polls can say anything. People are rightly skeptical. So let's look at what happens when people actually get to vote on it or have their say. We see the same thing. National consensus. We want this. In the past 6 or 7 years, this movement has exploded. 19 states officially on record calling for the 28th Amendment. 800 cities and towns supporting Congress growing. Many of those were ballot initiatives, like Montana, Colorado, 75% yes. Communities all over the country. Wisconsin, we're united to amend. Wisconsin United to Amend. George Penn and Jim Christ and others are doing so much good work, lighting up with communities passing ballot initiatives, 75, 80%. Janesville, Wisconsin, the House Speaker Paul Ryan's hometown, 84% yes. We have national consensus, and now we're cranking it up for cross-partisan power to turn that consensus into the votes in Congress and in the states that we need. And we will need cross-partisan support. The other thing about amendments is they're not delivered by one party usually. We'll need 67 senators. We'll need 290 House members. We'll need ratification in 38 states. We'll need Republicans, and we're getting them on board. We'll need Democrats. We're getting them on board. We'll need independents. This is our advisory council. Leaders from faith communities, business, veterans, teachers, students, political leaders from the Democratic and Republican parties, and independents and judges, and Americans demonstrating they're coming together to help win this and drive this amendment through our Congress and our state houses around the country. We have to be disciplined. American Promise, we focus on the amendment. We focus on building the cross-partisan network of support needed for it. That's critical. This is from our national conference in last October. Many of you may have been there. And that's Walter Jones, you remember, conservative Republican from North Carolina, a champion of the 28th Amendment. There's Donna Edwards to the right, and Jim McGovern, Jim Leach, Walter Jones, 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats. And then, most importantly, some of our friends below that in the Citizen Cafe and the citizen leaders around the country are what's most important. It's great to have a great inspiration from our advisory council. It's great to have support in Congress. It's great to have leaders from across the spectrum on this. But this doesn't happen without all of us, without the empowering the American people to take action, come together, and have a connected network that's unstoppable. And that's what we're doing across the country. That's what American Promise Associations are about. That's what our Candidate Pledge campaign is all about. It's what our ballot initiatives from Massachusetts, Wyoming, other states, our state legislative resolutions like Michigan, Ohio, Florida, everywhere in this country, we're empowering and supporting and coaching any way we can the American people to be able to stand up on this. And people are doing such a great job. It's inspiring and it's building fast in every state in the country. So look at where we're going. Look where we've been. We're going to continue to build this out. We have 150,000 people in every state in the union, and we can win this. That's the final key to an amendment. Is it will be an uphill fight. There'll be people entrenched interests trying to stop it. We not only have to believe we will win, we have to win by continuing to carry this through our communities, in our states, getting out to gather signatures, getting the candidate pledge out there, writing the letters to the editor, all the things we work on together all the time. And I promise you, more and more Americans are pouring into this, and we will win this thing. So with that, let me turn it back to Ben Gubitz. Thank you all again. Ben's going to share with us specific action steps that we can take. But it's been a great pleasure to celebrate Constitution Day and all you founders with us today, and really looking forward to starting right after this call, diving back in and working to win this 28th Amendment. So thanks, Ben. Back to you.
Thanks so much, Jeff. Wonderful to have you on this historic day in celebration. And we're going to be doing Q&A with Jeff here in just a few moments. But I real quickly wanted to make sure that folks on the call know how to get into action right away. As Jeff said, it takes all of us to really drive this forward. And the driving component of this is people power and joining together in our communities to fight for this historic reform. 2 ways to do this, 2 takeaways from today's call, and I'm going to introduce Waboy Gatheroo here in just a couple minutes, who's our newest Citizen Empowerment Coordinator at American Promise, and we're pleased to have her on. But one way is to start a new American Promise Association in your community. These are starting all over the country, including 3 that just launched in New Jersey and Wisconsin and Naperville, Illinois, and Winston-Salem, North Carolina, Kansas City, Missouri, all over the place. And I'm going to have Waboy talk to us a little bit about what that's like and how to get started. But before I pass it over to Waboy, I just want to direct everyone's attention to the American Promise Pledge campaign. This is an all-volunteer-led effort to get candidates and elected officials at all levels of government, either members of Congress or your state legislature or your city councilor, to pledge on the record that they will use their office to advance the 28th Amendment. And so in order to ultimately succeed in the ratification of the 28th Amendment, we're going to need the support of hundreds more elected officials. And the pledge is an effective tool to secure that support. So how the pledge campaign works is anyone can download and print out the pledge and ask a candidate or an incumbent elected official to sign it. Once that candidate or elected official has signed it, the forms are returned to American Promise, and we'll keep track and report who has and who hasn't signed the pledge. Essentially, we'll then turn the work of those pledges into action and leadership on the 28th Amendment. So, again, this is a wonderful opportunity to educate voters on where their elected officials stand on the 28th Amendment and turn the amendment into an election issue. I believe Congressman Jim McGovern, on a previous conference call said that people are really going to start paying attention when folks start to lose elections over this issue. I believe that firmly. And again, I think this pledge campaign is a wonderful way to educate the community and see where our elected officials stand. So how to access the pledge? You go to AmericanPromise.net/pledge. Again, it's AmericanPromise.net/pledge. And all of the information that I just reviewed is right there. I'll repeat that one more time. It's AmericanPromise.net/pledge. If you have other specific questions on the pledge or the language, etc., feel free to send me an email at beng@AmericanPromise.net. Again, it's beng@AmericanPromise.net. So real quickly, thrilled to have our newest team member of American Promise, Waboy Gatheru, on the phone with us. She's amazing, inspiring citizen empowerment coordinator, and she's going to talk to us a little bit about starting APAs. Waboy, welcome.
Hi, everyone. Happy Constitution Day to all of you. And again, my name is Waboy, and I am the Citizens Empowerment Coordinator at American Promise, and I am so excited to be doing this work. And I want to get into a little bit more about APAs, or American Promise Associations. So as we've been talking, people really power this movement forward. And I've been so inspired by all of the recent APAs that have sprung up all across the country. Like Ben had mentioned a couple seconds ago, we have 3 fantastic APAs in New Jersey, 1 outside of Chicago, 1 in North Carolina, and I'm going to be going to Tulsa next week to launch another fired up group of people who want to start an APA. And I just want to thank everybody on the call who already is in an APA or is thinking about starting one. It's honestly one of the best things that you can do to restore our democracy and create the republic that we want. So APAs are groups of engaged citizens who have taken on the task of creating champions in Congress, the media, and in their home state for the passage of the 28th Amendment to get big money out of politics and to restore our fundamental human liberties. Concerned groups of citizens coming together and doing what they really love is what drives this movement forward. So if you're interested in joining an APA, I would encourage you to email me directly at waboyg, so that's WAMBUIG, at AmericanPromise.net. And I'll repeat that one more time. That's WAM as in mom, B as in boy, U as in umbrella, I as in ice cream, and G as in green, at AmericanPromise.net. And I will reach out to you and we'll be in contact and we can hopefully start an APA in your area. Thank you so much, Ben and Jeff.
Thank you so much, Waboy. You're doing an excellent job, and I know that so many folks on the call are looking forward to working with you. So we have an amazing opportunity now to do some Q&A with Jeff, and I hope that folks will press 1 on your keypad if you have a question, whether the question is about Constitution Day or the 28th Amendment or other questions around Citizens United or anything that you can think of that you're not really sure of. Jeff is an expert and a national leader in this movement, so it's a great opportunity to talk to Jeff about this. So go ahead and press 1 on your keypad if you do have a question. Again, 1 on your keypad. When you do press 1 on your keypad, I'll know to unmute you, and I'll go ahead and do that so you can ask your question. While I'm giving folks a chance to press 1 on their keypad, we had some folks submit some questions before the conference, and I just wanted to get to one of those real quickly. This came from Sue in Illinois. Sue asked, what are some examples that corporations are what are some specific examples that corporations are doing in our community to mute the voices of citizens? That was Sue's question. So if we can start with that one and then give folks some time to press 1 on their keypad.
Sure. Thanks, Ben. And well, boy, thank you, too. It's great to have you and Azor working on supporting our citizen leaders all around the country so much. So it's a great question, and there's all kinds of answers that I think many Americans would have their own answer based on their experience. But I think we see it both nationally, whether it's on climate and the sort of catastrophic climate change we're seeing and our political system's complete inability to deal with it? Why are we the only country that is pulled out of the Paris Accords? Why do we have a unique healthcare system, to put it kindly, that nobody else in the world seems to think is a good idea? They're corporate run, essentially. The fossil fuel, the oil companies spend a fortune, billions of dollars, to make sure we don't take effective action on climate. The pharmaceutical companies and the health insurance companies, massive for-profit entities, make sure that we have a massive for-profit, expensive healthcare system that serves corporations, not the people, because they are able to control the political system, control candidates and politicians with the dominance of their money. But the saddest ones sometimes are when you see it face to face in people's communities. And I've been in just about every state in the country. And I think of my friend Betty Huron, Beckley, West Virginia, who lost her brother in the Massey Energy coal mine explosion that killed 29 men in a West Virginia coal mine. And there was a study of that showed how did that explosion happen, and there was all the scientific reasons and the coal dust that had gathered and the spark that set it off and so forth. But this independent commission literally said the reason this happened was because of Massey Energy Corporation's political spending and corruption of the government entities that were supposed to protect Betty's brother and those 29 other men. The explosion happened because Massey had spent millions of dollars to neuter the safety inspectors, to make sure that the politicians basically let them run a dangerous, unsafe, in fact criminal enterprise. They had thousands and thousands of violations of mine safety laws, thousands and thousands of Clean Water Act violations. None of them were being enforced, and they were throwing their weight around by spending money, and that's why the explosion happened. That's not me saying that. That's me reading the independent commission's report. So literally this is life and death in our communities, and it's life and death for our country. I think that's as simple as I can put it. I'd be eager to hear of other stories. Send them over to a boy or Azor or Ben or me. It's all our first name, last initial at AmericanPromise.net for our emails, because I think the most effective way we can help spread this movement is by empowering the American people not only to speak up and take action to fix the problem, but to speak up and be heard about how the problem is affecting them and their lives.
Thanks so much, Jeff. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great reminder that as we think about this issue, Jeff was talking about some of the money that's been spent in elections, and $45 billion, 0.5% of the population. And I think that this is just a really, stories like what happened in West Virginia and other places around the country is a reminder that this is about people. This is about people's lives, not just about numbers and kind of abstract, ideas. This is about how this issue is impacting people's lives all across the country. And just like in West Virginia, this is happening really in lots of communities across the country. So I appreciate you sharing that story. And again, quick plug, Jeff's book goes into a lot more detail on that specific story. Corporations Are Not People. It's a great book. So we're going to go to a question from folks on the call. We're going to start with Marie Henfelder-Kimmel. And Marie, go ahead. You're unmuted.
Hi, Ben. It's actually, we have a group of 8 of our new APA in South New Jersey, and one of my members,
wonderful,
Steve Miller, wants to ask a question. Steve.
Hi, it's very simple. What do we tell our representatives when they say this amendment will effectively end their access to a lot of money? They're going to say to us, how do we raise money now? What do we do? How do we answer that question?
Yeah, great question, Steve, and Marie and Steve and all you folks in South Jersey. Thanks for everything you're doing down there. You're building a great APA, and it was fun to see some of the folks from New Jersey come over to the Philadelphia event we had with Ben Cohen and the Pennsylvania launch of this big effort. Let me turn to the question. I think it's a really important one. How do they raise money? What do we mean when we say get money out of politics? Of course we need money to have politics happen. People have to run campaigns. They need signs, whatever. Even if we're running a small city council campaign, it takes money. Here's the thing. It's not about whether there's money. It's where it comes from. And we want our politicians raising money from the people in small donor ways. Bernie Sanders illustrated this can be done, averaged $27 for contributions. And there's no question it can be done. You can raise a lot of money if you actually try to be responsive to the people's interests and empower somebody who might only have $25 to give with the same kind of decency and respect that they now give to CEOs and billionaires. I talk to members of Congress, and it's sort of a not a well-kept secret that they're spending massive amounts of time. Some say 50%, some say, oh no, they're lying to you, it's more like 75%. But whatever it is, it's massive amounts of their day in little dark rooms, dialing for dollars, as they put it, and they're calling rich people all over the country. They're not talking to their constituents. They're talking to people who can give $37,000, $100,000, fund a super PAC with millions of dollars. That's who they're forced to talk to in this system. So I think the answer to the politicians and representatives who ask that question is say, look, we are going to make your life so much better. Wouldn't you rather get out of that dark room, stop talking to only one tiny little segment of Americans, come back home and talk to we in your district, your constituents, talk to us again, and we'll pitch in $10, $20, $50, and you'll have plenty if we have the 28th Amendment and we can limit the big money. That's how we empower everybody. That's how we have free speech for everybody, not just the few, where we are allowed to have limits. The Supreme Court says we can't do that now. The 28th Amendment says we can do that. So once we enact limits, the politicians and representatives and candidates will have to raise money the old-fashioned way, knocking on doors, dialing regular people, inspiring them and showing how they can make a difference in their lives, and raising a lot of money by small contributions. There's also really good ideas about public funding, or John Pudner at Take Back Our Republic, also on our advisory council, our friend conservative approach from Alabama. He wants to see, hey, why give all our tax dollars to the IRS? Let's have tax vouchers to credit for everyday people to be able to give a small contribution to the candidate of their choice and get a tax credit for it. So there's good ideas, and there's plenty of ways to make enough money in the system to work. And the best answer, Steve, I think, is to say, look, not only will these work, but you will do your job better, you'll like your job more, and you'll serve the people in the country more. So that's what I'd suggest for an answer.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. Great question, Steve, and hello to all in the South Jersey APA. We're going to go ahead and do one more question that was submitted beforehand because there were dozens, and want to make sure that we get a couple of those to compare. Again, if you're on the call and you have a question, go ahead and press 1 on your keypad so I know to unmute you. But this question, and I think that there's probably quite a few new folks on the call that haven't really, been in this type of democracy work for so long, and I'm sure that this is a question that some other folks might have. And Jeff, this question comes from someone named Lewis. What is the language in the proposed constitutional amendment? And maybe an opportunity to talk about American Promise and our views on that.
Yeah, great question. Thanks, Lewis. And so there's a couple of different approaches already in Congress that have gotten a lot of traction. So this isn't sort of pie in the sky or someday we'll have an amendment. There's good language right now. And I'll just summarize it and then direct you to where you can read more and tell a little bit more about what American Promise is doing to build the consensus and support behind a good, strong amendment. So the amendment that I'll mention first was introduced by Senator Tom Udall in the Senate and by Representative Jim McGovern, Ted Deutsch, and Jamie Raskin in Massachusetts, Florida, and Maryland, respectively. And this amendment would reverse the Citizens United decision, and it says that in order to protect the political equality of all Americans, the integrity of our government and elections, Congress and the states shall have the power to enact limits on election and campaign spending. And that's as clear as it is. And then Section 2 takes on the problem of corporations and says that the Congress and the states can distinguish between corporations and human beings in making those laws. So we could have, a $500 limit on campaign spend contributions or PACs contributions or whatever the limit is, and say, and you know what, the limit for corporations and unions, as it had been before Citizens United, is zero. We don't want entities that were created for economic activity to leverage economic power into political power. That's what that amendment does. And then the next one goes a little deeper on the problem of corporations. It says that Congress and the states shall enact reasonable limits or limits on contributions and spending in elections, and then says that constitutional rights are human rights. They're for the people, not corporations. So both of those have good support. There's some other ideas. As with any big thing, there's lots of people who have different approaches and different ideas. And so what we're doing at American Promise is trying to make sure everyone gets heard. We have to remember this is, we've won amendments as a people in days of the Pony Express and the Telegraph. We have a chance to win the first, we will win the first amendment in the Internet age. And we have a chance, if we use it, which is what we're trying to do, to give every American a voice into what that amendment should say, what they think about the current proposals. So if you go to AmericanPromise.net, that's our website, AmericanPromise.net. On the left-hand side under Who We Are, there's a tab under the Who We Are tab. Just click down to the 28th. And if you click on that 28th and just navigate, read it, keep clicking when it takes you further into the weeds if you wish to go there, and you'll see the different kind of work we're doing in a project we call Writing the 28th Amendment. It brings together constitutional scholars, judges, members of Congress, with, most important, all the American people and citizen leaders who have interests and ideas about this amendment. And it'll be going on for the next 18 months. I would encourage you to check it out, Louis, and everybody, to see what the amendment says, and most important, what it will say when we're pushing it through Congress in the coming months and just a few years.
Thanks, Jeff. Looking out for some more hands here. Might have a few shy folks on the call, and that's quite all right, but we're going to go back over to Marie. I think their group might have one more question. Marie?
Hi, Ben. Joan DeVore has a question.
Okay.
Yes, hi. I was wondering if you could go into a little bit more detail about the relationship between local action in terms of cities and towns passing resolutions, et cetera, and how that connects to getting a constitutional amendment to go through.
Yeah. Thanks, Joan. Great question. So, and that's one of the big things American Promise tries to do, because sometimes it's hard to remember when all of us, and I'm a volunteer too. We do our things in our communities, and you're out gathering a signature for a resolution or to get on the ballot, and it's sometimes hard to see the connection between that simple action, and it's not so simple. It takes guts. It takes civic courage, as we call it. How does that action connect to this huge historic thing of a constitutional amendment in the Constitution, making our republic better for all time? And here's how. You have to have faith that others are doing it too, because they are, and other communities are doing it too. That's how we have 800 resolutions, 19 states. And when that happens, and when we keep taking action where we live, I guarantee you members of Congress see it. We have had members of Congress on our national calls that we have on the second Saturday of each month. We have them at our national conference. And we ask them, does this work? What should we do to get the votes in Congress? Because ultimately, that's what we need. We need 290 votes in the House, 67 in the Senate, and ratification in 38 state legislatures. So we would like to see every town in America kind of alight with this issue. And the way we do that is by acting in our local communities, taking this action. It brings many more people into it. But it also, and we help with this by creating very positive feedback loops so other Americans see it and say, hey, I can do that too. And that's how we've gone from 0 to 44 senators on board. It's how we've gone from 0 to 150 representatives on board. It's how we've gone from 0 to 19 states. So we know how to do it, and we just have to have faith and not let up, that if we take action in our community, it will make a difference. And it's not just sort of pie in the sky, oh, it might make a difference. It will make a difference. And a lot of the infrastructure work that we do at American Promise, from our conference to AP Connect, to our monthly calls, to our emails, to everything we do, is about making that action you take in your community amplified, an inspiration to others, heard by members of Congress. So that's why we work so hard. It's not about, volunteers serve American Promise. Just the opposite. American Promise serves you. We serve the citizen leaders to make sure that we help you take an action, and when you do, help make sure it has the biggest possible impact. So it translates into votes in Congress and state legislatures, which translates into passage and ratification of the 28th Amendment.
Great question, Joan. Not seeing any more hands raised, so I'm just going to quickly go to one of the questions that was submitted beforehand. This comes from someone named Kathy, and Kathy's asking, what is the proposed timeline of ratifying the 28th Amendment? You want to speak to that real quickly, Jeff?
Sure do. So as I said, we have a strategy, and you can't really have a strategy to win if you don't know what winning looks like and back out from there to figure out what you have to do to get from here to there. So we backed out from what winning looks like. Winning looks like the 28th Amendment in the U.S. Constitution, limits on money, empowering regular citizens, getting a political system dependent on small donors, not billionaires. And to do that, to win the amendment, we realized, you need 2/3 of Congress, and it needs to be ratified in 3/4 of the states. So where are we, and what's our strategy to get there? Frankly, we see if we really work hard now, as we're doing, we keep doing this good work that we're doing now and keep building this and spreading this, I expect that we'll have impact in the 2018 election. That's why we do the candidate pledge. We don't care what party you're from. We want you to support the amendment, and if you don't, we want your voters to know about it, and then they can decide accordingly. But we think we need to have a Congress that has heard us, and that's going to take a couple of election cycles. I think 2018 and 2020 are critical. We don't sit back and wait for that. We don't wait for the normal partisan politics in elections to happen. It's not about partisan politics. It's about the amendment work across the political spectrum that actually makes the amendment be the issue and one of the key issues in 2018 and 2020. And then we believe that we will have the push in 2020 right after the election to get that 2/3 of Congress and then come out for a rapid ratification. Remember, a lot of the work we're doing locally and in states is both about getting the amendment through Congress, and we don't assume it's the Congress that we look at today. We assume it's the Congress we elect in 2018 and 2020. And then in that work, also, we are preparing for the ratification road so that when it comes back from Congress, it's not coming back to states that have never heard of this or state legislatures that don't know anything about it. It's coming back to states that have well-organized networks of American Promise associations and big, broad coalitions of support across many, many organizations and members and citizens so that we can get rapid ratification. So we're not talking about, someday far off in the future we'll have the amendment. We're talking about making sure every action we do today translates into winning that amendment along that timeline. So getting the vote in 2020, moving for rapid ratification after that.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeff and Kathy. Hope that answered your question. So not seeing any more hands, I'm going to kick it back over to Jeff here in just a moment for some closing remarks. But before I do that, I want to remind everybody of the 2 ways to get into action right away. Number 1, the pledge campaign. It's americanpromise.net/pledge. We hope that everyone will participate in making our incumbents and our candidates sign this pledge. And again, more instructions online, americanpromise.net/pledge. And then start an American Promise Association in your community. Please reach out to Waboy. That's W-A-M as in Mary, B as in boy, U-I-G at americanpromise.net. And I'm going to kick it back over to you real quick, Jeff, but I wanted to show folks real quickly on the call. I was driving back from Cape Cod today, and I heard the hilarious Paula Poundstone talking about Constitution Day, and she's one of my favorite comedians, and she said, when we live up to our Constitution, as I think that we will when we, and getting closer as we ratify the 28th Amendment, she said, when we live up to our Constitution, let's form a conga line around the Capitol and bungee jump off the dome. I don't know if I'm going to be bungee jumping, but I'll definitely be joining that conga line. Together we will win, and I look forward to celebrating this historic victory with all of you, and happy Constitution Day. So, Jeff, I'm going to kick it back over to you to just close out real quickly, and then we will look forward to talking with everyone real soon.
Well, thanks, Ben, and my boy, thank you so much. And thanks to everyone on the call and all your great questions, and most importantly, all your great work around the country to make this a reality. I'm going to go to the last slide, and if you're on your computer and can see it, I started this call with noting that Constitution Day celebrates not just the founders in the old white wigs coming out of Philadelphia, Independence Hall in 1787, but the American people that were just like us, had hopes and dreams, and at times I'm sure doubted whether they had the power to do it, but did it anyway. And this slide shows some of the celebrations from the end of slavery and the renewed promise that, of course, still needs delivery every generation of equality for all, regardless of race, and to women winning the right to vote, Americans winning the right to vote for all, regardless of gender, everyone over 18, and the poll tax ended, and so much more. And if you look at this picture, if you're not on the only on your phone, you'll be able to see there's no politicians in these pictures. They're Americans. They're celebrating their wins for the amendment and the different amendments from the 26th to the 17th to the 13th and more. And not only are they happy, but they're feeling empowered. You can see they have done what people told them they couldn't do. And just one last note on that. In 1915, 4 years before the 19th Amendment giving women the right to vote was passed and ratified, in 1915, there was an editorial in actually quite a progressive magazine, The New Republic, that noted that the women's suffrage movement had just lost. 2 more states had rejected the idea of equal voting rights for women. And they were basically saying, why don't they just go home? This is not going to happen. It's never going to happen. Well, they didn't go home, and 4 years later they were celebrating the 19th Amendment and equal rights. And that's what we're going to be doing. If you hear people say, oh, it's too hard or it's not going to happen, have faith. We will win this, and we will celebrate together. So thank you, everybody. Happy Constitution Day. And I look forward to working with you to win this and to celebrate together. We'll leave the bungee jumping to Ben, and we'll all be in the conga line to catch you when you jump, Ben.
I love it. Jeff, thank you so much.